This is Inner Work, a spiritual growth podcast, a sanctuary for healers, light workers, and spiritual practitioners here to raise consciousness on this planet. You've come to the right place to heal yourself and fully awaken your unique gifts so you can show up to serve others as powerfully and purposefully as possible. I am your host, Josephine Hartman, a certified intuitive healer and Akashic Records master teacher. I'm honored you're here and delighted to walk with you on your path for a little while. To connect with me and explore ways of working together, please head over to josephinehartman.com. Hello, my friend and fellow lightworker on the path. Welcome to this episode of Inner Work. And in fact, I'd love to extend a warm welcome to you to this brand new podcast series under the umbrella of Inner Work. And I am calling this series Inner Revolution. If you've been with me for a while, listening to this podcast for a while, I would be eternally grateful if you can take a second to leave a positive rating or review and to subscribe to this podcast if you haven't done that yet. Or if you find that this episode in particular offers you something of value, please leave that positive rating or review as well, which helps the podcast be discovered by other people on the path who could benefit, and also helps me keep the podcast completely free of ads. That is a really important commitment that I've made so that you can enjoy this content without any interruptions. So it's been a while since I created a specific series for the podcast like this, and that's because I don't like to force these things, and I just have been sort of living life, and my schedule has been occupied with teaching, mentoring students, creating videos and regular podcast episodes, writing. I'm also in the middle of moving. So I was just allowing kind of life to take me wherever it would take me, and not forcing anything and allowing the inspiration to come whenever it needed to. And I feel now the time has come. So a couple of my previous podcast series include my Triggered series, which a lot of you have appreciated over the years. I also did an Evolution series, an Awakening series. All of these you can go back and find in past episodes. And let me share with you why I'm calling this new series Inner Revolution, because there are a couple of reasons behind that name and that inspiration. So first of all, as you know, this podcast is called Inner Work. And when we do our inner work genuinely and with commitment, often this does lead to a sort of inner revolution, where our inner state of being, our frequency, what we are made up of internally, how we show up in the world, how we feel about ourselves, how we see ourselves and others, how we approach life, our inner dialogue, everything is transformed. And that process of transformation, if we're really in it, if we're really doing it, can be revolutionizing to our sense of self. It can help us become more of who we really are, which means we have to let go of anything that is not true for us. So here's a basic definition. If we're thinking about revolution in terms of politics, so the term revolution in that case can mean a forcible overthrow of a government or social order in favor of a new system. If we apply this then to our inner work and our inner revolution, what this means is that we are overthrowing what doesn't serve us, whatever is misaligned or limiting or outdated in ourselves, within ourselves, and we are replacing that or shifting that into a new system, which is a new way of being. So, for example, in this process of inner revolution, we might overthrow, so to speak, an old way of being or an old way of coping based on survival or perfectionism or self-judgment or validation seeking. These are kind of the old systems, right? And we will overthrow these when we do our inner work, and we can replace them with a new order or a new system for how we show up in the world based on things like co-creation, self-compassion, self-acceptance, radical honesty with ourselves and others, and really making a conscious commitment to expanding and growing and being a source of light for ourselves and others. So very different kinds of systems, right? And very different kinds of paradigms. So this is the inner revolution that we're talking about here. The second thing I wanted to mention is that this inner revolution, again, if we're genuinely in it, genuinely doing it, is likely going to be messy at times. Human beings are messy just by our nature, and the process of inner transformation tends to be messy too. As you shuffle, as you reshuffle certain aspects of yourself, as you discard what doesn't serve you, and you dismantle certain patterns, you replace them, you figure out who you really are, you align your actions, choices, and behaviors with who you really are. This can take time. It can be a messy process. It can happen in fits and starts. It can happen through a non-linear progression most of the time. So in the process of real transformation and inner revolution, we experience both a lot of expansion and we also experience contraction, just as women do in the process of giving birth. So physically, the process of giving birth, and we can also think about the creative process, which anyone can do of any gender, right? So that creative process of giving birth to a new creation, a piece of writing, a piece of art, whatever it might be. Those contractions or periods of contraction in our lives and on our paths are there to strengthen us. They are there to move us towards something new. They are there to create a certain pressure that gets us to move or gets us to change. And then the big expansions follow from there. Without the contractions, we wouldn't have the expansions. We wouldn't have the lasting change. Sometimes we wouldn't have the motivation to change. So we have to honor those contractions. We have to honor the moments when we feel lost or confused or stuck, because they are serving a purpose too, and they are moving us towards something too. This is one of the things we'll be coming back to over and over throughout this series, this idea that we have to honor it all. We honor the light in ourselves, we honor our brilliance and gifts and inner divinity and magnitude, and we also honor our humanity, our shadows, our messiness, our challenges, the places in us that still need healing, all of the so-called messy things that we move through in life. We bring all of it to the table. We lay it out on that table so we can really take a look at it all. We exclude nothing. And we always honor where we are and where we have been. If we don't do this, if we kind of gloss over where we've been, or if we try to hide or leave out or suppress certain parts of ourselves or parts of our story and where we come from, that's when things can get really stuck or stagnant, and our inner revolution can't really happen. It can't flow. So another reason I wanted to create this new series is because I feel very strongly that we are at a time in our history, in human history, where we need people to more rapidly awaken, to become much more conscious, to work through their own stuff and their own baggage. And this is true for all of us, so I include myself in that statement, so that we can all together contribute to the new reality, the new consciousness, the new human experience and humane experience that we would like to create and have. Something which is very different from what we're experiencing these days in the world. If you're listening to this podcast episode, I have zero doubt that you are part of this outer revolution as well, and that you know your individual healing, your individual growth, transformation, alignment, sense of purpose and power. All of these things are intimately tied to the external changes that we want to create. In this podcast series, we're going to go deep. We're going to work together on accelerating our awakening, accelerating our evolutionary and growth processes, so that we are all better equipped to contribute and serve and play our part in the collective awakening and the changes that humanity desperately needs. So this means that this podcast series is not for those looking to stay on the surface of things. It's not for those who are spiritually curious, kind of 1 foot in, 1 foot out, or just looking for a quick fix, feel good, unicorns and rainbows type of experience. This podcast series is meant for you if you prefer depth over surface. If you are someone who goes all the way, like when you start something, you commit and you go all the way. If you are someone who appreciates nuance and examining things from all possible angles. If you are someone who is looking to truly evolve, even if that requires some big things from you or some big ways in which you are meant to show up for yourself and in the world. So this podcast series is for you if you don't shy away from that kind of spiritual challenge, and if you hold integrity, honesty, groundedness, walking the walk, and serious commitment to spirituality as your personal values. If you do, if that is resonating with you, if you are nodding along, then you are in absolutely the right place, and I'm excited for what we're going to do here together. In these episodes, we'll be talking about some concepts that are essential to the process of waking up spiritually and to developing ourselves in meaningful ways. We're going to be focusing on psycho-spiritual development, and I also want to make these episodes practical and be able to give you actual things that you can work with and implement in daily life. So I'll be suggesting little exercises here and there, self-reflection prompts, journaling prompts, things to do, things to try out as we go if you are game. As always, you are a sovereign being, so you have total free will and choice in how you want to go about this. Take what resonates and leave the rest. So after this very long introduction and setting the stage for this podcast series, let's go into episode 1, which is called Awakening. So we start here with your process of awakening. And again, the fact that you are here listening to this right now and that you have been drawn to my work, to this podcast, this tells us that you have experienced a great extent and degree of spiritual awakening. Maybe you are still in the throes of that. Maybe you are looking to get to your next level of awakening. You might even be experiencing an upheaval in some or multiple areas of your life as you are realizing what's working for you, what's not working for you in your life. Perhaps you're coming to terms with some courageous choices that you need to be making. And as we were saying before, this upheaval is part of the inner revolution that we go through when we are genuinely changing and evolving. So the awakening process is an ongoing journey. As you know, it's not like we're asleep one day and then we are totally awake and enlightened and evolved the next. Instead, we can choose to use our whole lifetime, all of the time that we have here, to deepen and to continue our ever-evolving awakening. And that's, for me personally, that's one of the ways that I look at, what is my life's purpose? One of those purposes is to evolve and awaken to the highest possible level in this lifetime. So this is actually why you're here at your deepest level, to wake up, to heal yourself, to remember your light and your power, to evolve as both a human and as a spiritual being. You're here to shed layers of conditioning. You're here to shed layers of unhelpful patterns and beliefs that don't reflect the highest truth of who you are. So even though waking up spiritually can sometimes happen in a spontaneous way, so sometimes, even though this process is not an overnight process, but sometimes we do have these intense moments or sparks where we wake up to a much greater extent than we've been awakened before. So sometimes that can happen spontaneously. Now, staying on the path of awakening is a whole other story. Staying awake and becoming gradually more and more awake requires daily commitment, sometimes hourly commitment to the path. It requires presence. It requires self-awareness. It requires bravery. Staying on the path of awakening, making that conscious choice every day, is not for the faint of heart. You have to be willing to show up for yourself over and over. Prioritize your spiritual and self-care practices. And this also includes being willing to look at those moments when you are not prioritizing your spiritual and self-care practices. What's getting in the way? What is creating the procrastination? Or what is creating the belief that you are not worthy or not spiritual enough, or that you have to take care of everyone else, and there's no time for self-care or whatever the limiting beliefs might be. So being radically honest with yourself about that. You must be willing to be truthful and authentic with everyone you meet, including yourself. And you must be willing to own your stuff. So this includes unhealthy patterns, attachments, dysfunctional behaviors, limiting beliefs or thoughts, ego agendas, any tendency to lie to yourself and or others, so on and so forth. So no wonder most people choose to stay asleep, right? Or they just stay asleep unconsciously, because it does require work to stay awake and to awaken more and more every day. So no wonder sometimes we try to go back to sleep, often through addictive or unhealthy behaviors and habits. In our human culture, it's extremely tempting to give into distraction. That's how I'm going to put it. And it's extremely tempting to want to go back to sleep or to go back to unconsciousness. It's also very tempting to identify with the role of victim, with a victim archetype, which means that we give our power away. Victimhood is one of the strongest behavior patterns that keeps people asleep. It hinders, delays, and sometimes can interfere completely with people's awakening. Playing the victim can bring us some powerful advantages and benefits. That's why we do it. And by the way, we do it unconsciously. Nobody ever, I don't believe, is ever playing the role of victim or identifying with that role on purpose, or to try to consciously get anything from anyone, right? This is completely happening at an unconscious level because, as I said, playing the victim can bring us some powerful benefits. These include getting sympathy or empathy from others, not having to show up fully in our lives, not having to take responsibility for what we are creating. Sometimes playing the victim, it can kind of force other people, the people around us, to step into the role of helper or fixer. So it's almost like we're playing out this unconscious dynamic with other people as well. Because when we are in the role of victim, that can sometimes trigger someone else's sense of guilt or someone else's sense of, I have to help and put myself last and fix whatever's going on with everyone else, so on and so forth. So we're playing all of these unconscious roles with each other. All of this is happening when it happens at the expense of our own growth and healing. So these so-called benefits of victimhood, of other unconscious patterns and coping mechanisms, these benefits are actually detrimental, and they keep us stuck in behavior and thinking and emotions and choices that in the end really can hurt us or can just really slow down our awakening process. And it is important to remember, I just want to say again, that none of us are ever choosing to play the victim intentionally. And none of us either are choosing to play people pleaser intentionally. None of us are choosing to step into that fixer or helper role intentionally either. These are all knee-jerk, unconscious reactions. So these are behaviors that we adopt unconsciously as survival or coping mechanisms to try to get our needs met. So I want to go through some examples of victimhood-based behaviors that interfere with the awakening process. So right away, as you can see, we're going into radical honesty about all of this and into just a radical acknowledgement of where we are, where we've been, where we want to be moving forward, which requires us to just own where we've been, own our patterns, own our stuff, which we can do powerfully together. So here are some examples of victimhood-based behaviors. Always blaming others when we experience something unwanted or challenging or painful in our lives. Manipulating or one-upping others by oversharing a lot of the time, how much we are suffering. So we could also call this dumping our life stories or trauma onto other people. Being unwilling to look at our own patterns, choices, words, or past actions. Now, I know, of course, because you are listening to this episode, that this behavior is not a reflection of you, because you are very much willing to look at your own quote-unquote stuff, which is what we're going to do here together in a loving and compassionate way. Another victimhood-based behavior is expecting others to rescue, fix, or heal us, and maybe getting mad with them when they don't, or getting disappointed, or creating distance, right? So pushing people away when they're not able to fix or heal us in the ways that we want them to, which ultimately really is impossible because nobody outside of us can fix or heal or rescue us or get us to change in any way, right? That has to come from within. So with these victimhood-based behaviors, of course, first of all, we want to be extremely mindful of when we might slip into some of these patterns. Have a lot of compassion for yourself, have a lot of understanding for the parts of you that might slip into these behavioral patterns because those parts of you are not doing it on purpose. These have just been habits that have been built up over many years, likely. So just be compassionate about that. And also we can use these behaviors or these examples of behaviors to be mindful of how other people around us are behaving or how they're showing up in the world and what is hindering their growth and evolution. So we can take a look at that and use those examples too to see, okay, how do I want to be in my life? Or how is it best for me to respond to my loved one who maybe is in a place of victimhood? How can I be so loving and compassionate with them but not feed into any of these victimhood behaviors? So on and so forth. So just overall being really mindful about when these behaviors show up, whether in ourselves or in others, and how we want to consciously respond when that happens. So all of these behavioral patterns strip people of their power and of their light and their inner strength and resourcefulness. These kinds of patterns also tend to drain our energy, our life force, and disconnect us from our powerful intuition and inner knowing. And here, I'm not only talking about victimhood, but also something like compulsive validation seeking or approval seeking. So let's say if we are thinking or believing that someone outside of us, some authority figure outside of us has all the answers, or that we have to consult with someone before we're able to make a decision in our lives. We are giving our power away and we are turning our backs on our own intuition and inner knowing. So we are prioritizing or privileging someone else's inner knowing above our own. In the process of awakening, it is crucial that we take back that inner power, that we reconnect with our inner authority, and that we only seek approval, so to speak, from ourselves, not from anyone outside of us. So it's essential to notice any of these patterns, beliefs, ways of being that could interfere with your awakening. This is going to allow you to address them and to avoid delaying or stopping your soul's evolution. So it's kind of like mission critical, right? So important that we continue awakening as much as we can. So I want to offer some self-reflection prompts for this episode number 1, Awakening. And with these prompts, total honesty with yourself is going to be really, really important, as well as holding a sense of curiosity, a sense of self-compassion, almost like you're putting on, an explorer's hat, if you will, and just going within to do some inner exploration. We're not going to judge anything that arises. We just want to gather more information. So the first prompt is, in which ways is it easy for you to commit to your awakening process? In which ways do you find it easy to commit to your awakening process? So for example, for you, it might feel relatively easy to do yoga 3 times a week, or to journal consistently, or to work with tarot cards, or to go to therapy. If therapy is a setting where you are getting support in your evolution and awakening process. So think about those activities, think about those places and areas where for you it's relatively easy to commit to your awakening and to these kinds of awakening practices. And we want to take a look at this, not just to get a sense of where you are, but also because we do want to celebrate and acknowledge you for all of the work you've been putting in and all of the ways in which you have been showing up relatively consistently. It doesn't have to be perfect, but relatively consistently, where you've been showing up for your spiritual practices and your spiritual growth. After that, our next prompt is, in which ways is it harder or more challenging for you to stay committed to your awakening process? So in which ways is it more challenging for you to stay committed to your awakening process? So you might find, for example, that it is more challenging for you to sit and meditate every day. Maybe you have some resistance to that, or some limiting beliefs like, it's too hard for me to sit still, or it's too hard for me to stop all of my thoughts and stop the mental chatter and be able to meditate. So you might be putting unrealistic expectations or pressure on yourself, or you might have some perfectionism going on, like unless you sit down and you're having the most transcendent meditation and totally quieting your mind every single time, then it feels like a failure, which is a form of resistance, by the way, just judging the experience and judging yourself. You might find it more challenging to set boundaries with certain people in your life, or to soften some addictive or compulsive behaviors. So think about, where is it challenging to stay committed to your awakening process and to your spiritual path. And from there, we want to move into which behaviors or patterns do you need to shift or release to avoid hindering your own evolution. So which behaviors or patterns, and this could be internal, it could be external, do you need to shift or release to avoid hindering your evolution? So I'm going to invite you to reflect on this prompt and all of these prompts for the next few days and start becoming more aware of any patterns or tendencies or temptations to go back to sleep or to sabotage your own healing or to allow resistance to get in the way. And that's going to be an amazing starting point for us on this journey of inner revolution. Thank you so much for being here for this inaugural episode of this new series. Again, if you would be so kind to take a couple of seconds or a minute to leave a positive rating or review for this podcast, I will be forever grateful, so thankful, so that this podcast can be found by others who need it, and so we can keep it free of ads. To connect with me, as always, you can head over to www.josephinehartman.com, or you can send a note to me at josephinehartman.com. Thank you so much for being here. I hope something here has been helpful, inspiring, thought-provoking, and I will catch you in the next episode as we continue the journey.